The December wind howled across the Twin Falls Depot platform with a vicious bite that could strip the warmth from a person's bones in minutes. And Zelda Brennan stood there trembling so violently she could barely keep her carpetbag from slipping through her numb fingers. She had arrived on the afternoon train from Salt Lake City with nothing but the thin traveling dress on her back, a few dollars sewn into her hem, and the desperate hope that her aunt's telegram had been sincere when it promised her work and shelter in this remote Idaho territory town. The year was 1884, and winter in Twin Falls showed no mercy to those unprepared for its cruelty. Zelda's teeth chattered as she scanned the nearly empty platform, searching for the familiar face she had not seen since childhood. Her aunt was supposed to meet her here, but the platform stood nearly deserted except for a few departing passengers hurrying toward waiting wagons and the station master disappearing into his office. The cold penetrated through her dress like needles of ice, and she wrapped her arms around herself in a futile attempt to generate warmth. She had sold her winter coat back in Salt Lake to afford the train ticket, banking everything on the promise of a new beginning. "Miss, are you waiting for someone?" The voice came from behind her, deep and concerned, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent years under open skies. Zelda turned to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, his weathered face showing genuine worry beneath the brim of a brown Stetson. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with striking green eyes that seemed to assess her situation in a single glance. His leather duster hung open, revealing a work shirt and vest, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to handling whatever challenges came his way. "I am waiting for my aunt," Zelda managed through chattering teeth, her breath coming out in white clouds. "Mrs. Dorothy Hayes. She was supposed to meet me here." The cowboy's expression shifted to something almost apologetic. "Dorothy Hayes moved to Boise 3 weeks ago. Her sister took ill and she left pretty sudden-like." "I am sorry, miss. Did she not send word?" The bottom dropped out of Zelda's world. She swayed slightly, the cold and shock combining to make her lightheaded. There had been no word, no telegram, nothing to warn her that the one lifeline she had counted on had vanished. Behind her lay nothing but a trail of burned bridges and a stepfather who had made it clear she was no longer welcome under his roof after her mother's death 6 months prior. Ahead lay only uncertainty and the very real possibility of freezing to death on this desolate platform. "I see," she whispered, though the words barely formed through her frozen lips. The cowboy stepped closer, his expression resolute. Without hesitation, he shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and moved to drape it around her shoulders. "Here, you are freezing half to death. Get this on before you catch your end." The warmth of the coat enveloped her like an embrace, still holding the heat from his body. It smelled of leather, sage, and wood smoke, and Zelda found herself pulling it tighter around her shoulders despite her instinct to refuse charity. "I cannot take your coat, sir. You will freeze." "I have been working in worse cold than this since I was knee-high to a grasshopper," he said firmly. "You need it more than I do right now. Name is Ethan Keller. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town with my brother." "Zelda Brennan," she replied, her voice still shaking. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Keller, but I do not know what I am going to do now. I have nowhere to go." Ethan glanced at the darkening sky, then back at her face. She could see him weighing options, considering possibilities. The wind picked up again, sending snow flurries across the platform, and he made his decision. "Look, Miss Brennan, I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust a stranger, but I cannot in good conscience leave you here. My brother's wife, Sarah, runs a boarding house in addition to helping with ranch work. They have a spare room, and Sarah is always looking for help with the cooking and cleaning. It would not be charity, it would be honest work for honest pay. Zelda studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She had learned the hard way that not all men who offered help had pure intentions. But Ethan Keller's green eyes held only genuine concern, and the fact that he mentioned his sister-in-law suggested a family situation rather than a solitary man with questionable plans. More importantly, she had no other options. The alternative was spending her few remaining dollars on a hotel room and then finding herself destitute within days. "I would be grateful for the work," she said finally, "and I promise I am a hard worker. I will earn my keep." Relief washed over Ethan's features. "I never doubted it. My wagon is just over there. Let us get you someplace warm before we both turn into ice sculptures." He picked up her carpetbag before she could protest and guided her toward a sturdy wagon hitched to two patient horses. Ethan helped her up onto the bench seat with a steady hand, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from the depot, Zelda felt the first stirrings of something she had not experienced in months. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but present nonetheless. The ride through Twin Falls revealed a town still finding its footing in the harsh Idaho territory. Buildings lined the main street in various stages of completion, from the established general store and saloon to newer structures still smelling of fresh cut lumber. The Snake River Canyon cut through the landscape to the south. Its presence felt even when not directly visible. As they left the town behind, the terrain opened into rolling hills covered in sagebrush and winter-brown grass, with the distant mountains standing as silent sentinels against the darkening sky. "Twin Falls is not much to look at yet," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "But it is growing." The railroad coming through changed things considerably. More settlers arriving every month, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. "How long have you been here?" Zelda asked, grateful for the conversation to distract from her uncertain situation. "My brother Marcus and I came out 4 years ago in 1880. We worked as hired hands for a couple of years, saved every penny and bought our ranch 2 years back. It is not the biggest spread in Idaho, but it is ours. We run about 200 head of cattle, some horses, and Sarah keeps chickens and a kitchen garden that produces miracles in the growing season." There was unmistakable pride in his voice, the satisfaction of a man who had built something with his own hands. Zelda found herself warming to him beyond the simple gratitude for his intervention. There was something solid and dependable about Ethan Keller, a sense that he was exactly who he presented himself to be without pretense or hidden agendas. "Where are you from originally?" she ventured. "Missouri," he replied. "Small town outside of Kansas City. Our pa had a farm, but when he died, it went to our older brother as was customary. Marcus and I decided to head west and make our own way rather than work someone else's land forever. What about you, Miss Brennan? Where does your journey start?" Zelda hesitated, unused to sharing her story. "Salt Lake City most recently, but I was born in Ohio. My mother remarried after my father died when I was 12 and we moved to Utah. When she passed 6 months ago, my stepfather made it clear he had no interest in continuing to provide for me. I received a telegram from my aunt offering work and a place to stay, so I spent my last money on the train ticket west." "That is rough," Ethan said quietly. "Losing your mother and your home all at once. I am sorry you have had to deal with that." The simple sympathy in his voice threatened to crack the careful composure Zelda had maintained. She blinked back the sudden sting of tears and focused on the landscape ahead. "Thank you. I am just grateful you were at the depot today. I do not know what I would have done otherwise." "God has a way of putting people where they need to be," Ethan said. I almost did not go into town today. Was planning to mend fence on the north pasture, but one of our horses threw a shoe this morning, so I had to bring him to the blacksmith. Finished earlier than expected and figured I would check if there was any mail at the depot before heading home. Timing worked out exactly right. They lapsed into comfortable silence as the wagon rolled along the rutted road. The sun sank lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Despite the cold and her uncertain future, Zelda felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. The coat around her held off the worst of the wind, and the solid presence of the man beside her provided a sense of security she had not felt in a long time. The Keller ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. The main house stood 2 stories tall, built of logs with a wide front porch and smoke rising from 2 chimneys. A large barn dominated the yard, with several smaller outbuildings scattered around. A split-rail fence enclosed a pasture where cattle clustered together against the cold. Warm light glowed from the house windows, promising warmth and shelter. As Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop near the house, the front door opened, and a woman emerged onto the porch. She was perhaps 30 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a flour-dusted apron over her dress. Her face showed curiosity rather than suspicion as she took in the unexpected guest. "Ethan, you are back late," she called, "and you brought company." "Sarah, this is Miss Zelda Brennan," Ethan said, hopping down and moving to help Zelda from the wagon. She came in on the afternoon train expecting to meet Dorothy Hayes, but of course Dorothy is not here anymore. Miss Brennan is looking for work, and I thought you might have room for her. Sarah's expression shifted immediately to warm concern. "Oh, you poor thing. You must be frozen through. Come inside right now and get warm. We can sort out the details once you have some hot food in you and feeling in your fingers again." Zelda climbed down from the wagon with Ethan's assistance, her legs stiff from the cold and the journey. She started to remove his coat, but he waved her off. "Keep it until you are inside and warmed up. I need to tend to the horses anyway." Sarah ushered Zelda into the house with the efficiency of someone accustomed to handling unexpected situations. The interior was warm and welcoming, with simple but well-made furniture and the mouth-watering smell of something cooking. A fire crackled cheerfully in the stone fireplace, and Zelda gravitated toward it instinctively. "Let me get you some coffee," Sarah said, already moving toward the kitchen. "Or would you prefer tea?" "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you," Zelda replied, finally allowing herself to believe she might actually be safe. A few minutes later, she sat in a chair near the fireplace with a steaming mug of coffee in her hands and feeling gradually returning to her extremities. Sarah settled into the chair across from her, her eyes kind but assessing. "So Ethan says you are looking for work," Sarah began. "What experience do you have?" "I can cook, clean, sew, and manage household accounts," Zelda said. "I helped run my stepfather's house after my mother became ill, and before that, I worked in a boarding house in Ohio for 2 years. I am not afraid of hard work and I learn quickly." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "We do run a small boarding house here, though right now we only have 2 long-term boarders. Both are ranch hands who work for neighbors and prefer to have their meals provided rather than fend for themselves. With the ranch work and trying to keep up with the house and the boarders, I have been stretched thin lately. If you are willing, I could certainly use the help. Room and board plus $15 a month to start. If it works out well, we can discuss raising that after a few months." $15 a month was more than fair, especially with room and board included. Zelda felt the tight band of anxiety around her chest loosen slightly. "That sounds very generous, Mrs. Keller. I accept, and I promise you will not regret giving me this chance. Call me Sarah, please. We do not stand on formality much out here, and I have a good feeling about you, Zelda. Ethan has always had a knack for reading people, and if he brought you here, that is good enough for me. The front door opened, and Ethan entered along with another man who could only be his brother Marcus. The family resemblance was clear in the similar build and coloring, though Marcus stood a few inches shorter and had brown eyes instead of green. Both men stomped snow from their boots and hung their hats on pegs by the door. "Marcus, this is Zelda Brennan," Sarah said. "She will be staying with us and helping me with the house and the boarders." Marcus nodded in greeting. "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Brennan. Any friend of Ethan's is welcome here." "I am very grateful for your hospitality," Zelda said, rising from her chair. "I promise to earn my keep." "Sarah says you are worth having around. That is all that matters to me," Marcus replied with an easy grin. "My wife is the brains of this operation. Ethan and I just provide the muscle." Sarah rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Go wash up, both of you. Supper will be ready in 20 minutes, and I expect you presentable at the table." The evening meal proved to be a lively affair. The two boarders, Walt and Jim, were friendly young ranch hands who treated Zelda with respectful courtesy. The conversation ranged from cattle prices to weather predictions to amusing anecdotes about mishaps on various ranches in the area. Zelda found herself relaxing in the warm, welcoming atmosphere, so different from the tense silences that had characterized meals at her stepfather's table. She caught Ethan watching her several times during the meal, but his gaze held only friendly interest rather than anything improper. When their eyes met, he offered a small smile that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Zelda quickly looked away, reminding herself that she was here to work and rebuild her life, not to develop foolish romantic notions about the first kind man she encountered. After dinner, Sarah showed Zelda to a small room on the second floor. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Clean curtains framed the window, and a handmade quilt covered the bed. After months of uncertainty and the genuine fear she had experienced on the train platform, this simple room felt like a palace. "It is not fancy, but it is clean and warm," Sarah said. "The privy is out back, though we keep chamber pots under the beds for nighttime. Breakfast is at 6, but if you need to sleep later tomorrow to recover from your journey, that is fine." "I will be up at 6, Zelda assured her. "I want to start earning my place here right away." Sarah smiled. "I believe you will fit in just fine here, Zelda. Sleep well." Alone in the room, Zelda unpacked her meager belongings and changed into her nightgown. She knelt beside the bed and offered a prayer of gratitude for the unexpected turn her desperate situation had taken. When she finally climbed under the quilt, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, carrying her into the deepest sleep she had experienced in months. True to her word, Zelda rose before dawn the next morning and made her way downstairs to the kitchen. She found Sarah already up, stoking the fire in the cast-iron stove. "Good morning," Sarah said, looking pleased. "You are an early riser." "That is excellent because mornings are always busy around here." "Put me to work," Zelda said. "I am here to help." They fell into an easy rhythm with Sarah providing direction and Zelda quickly proving her competence. She mixed biscuits while Sarah fried bacon and eggs. She set the table and prepared coffee, moving with the efficiency of someone who had done such work countless times. By the time the men began appearing for breakfast, the kitchen was filled with the mouth-watering aromas of a hearty meal. Ethan was the last to arrive, his hair still damp from washing. His eyes found Zelda immediately, and he offered her a warm smile. "Good morning, Miss Brennan. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, feeling that flutter again and firmly suppressing it. "Your family has been incredibly kind. We are happy to have the help," Marcus interjected, already loading his plate. "Sarah has been working herself ragged trying to keep up with everything." The next several weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Zelda threw herself into the work with determination, eager to prove her worth. She and Sarah managed the household together, and Zelda quickly learned the rhythms of ranch life. She discovered she had a talent for bread making that impressed even the notoriously picky Jim, and her organizational skills brought new order to the household accounts and supply management. The winter deepened, bringing heavy snows that occasionally trapped everyone inside for days at a time. During these periods, Zelda found herself spending more time with Ethan. He would often sit at the kitchen table in the evenings, working on tack repairs or account books while she mended clothes or prepared the next day's bread dough. They talked easily about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, debating books they had read, and discussing dreams for the future. Zelda learned that Ethan was 26 years old, just 3 years older than herself. He had a quick mind that he lamented not being able to develop through formal education beyond the 8th grade. But he read voraciously whenever he had the chance. He was patient with animals and fair with people, qualities she observed in his interactions with everyone from his family to the hired hands to the merchants in town. For his part, Ethan was drawn to Zelda's quiet strength and resilience. She never complained about the hard work or the isolation of ranch life. She had a dry wit that occasionally caught him off guard, making him laugh in genuine delight. He found himself looking for excuses to be in the kitchen when she was working there, offering to carry heavy pots or fetch supplies from the cellar. Sarah noticed, of course. She watched with knowing amusement as her brother-in-law found increasingly transparent reasons to be near their new helper. One afternoon in late January, as she and Zelda worked together on a massive laundry project, she decided to broach the subject. "Ethan seems quite taken with you," Sarah said casually, scrubbing at a stubborn stain. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am sure I do not know what you mean." "He is simply being friendly." "Zelda, I have known Ethan for nearly 5 years. He is friendly to everyone, but he does not find excuses to spend time in the kitchen when Walt or Jim are the only ones here. He likes you, and unless I am very much mistaken, the feeling is mutual." There seemed little point in denying it. Zelda had caught herself watching for Ethan's return when he went to work in the fields. She looked forward to their evening conversations more than she cared to admit. Her heart lifted when he smiled at her, and she found herself thinking about him at odd moments throughout the day. "I do like him," Zelda admitted quietly. "But I am in no position to think about such things. I have only been here 6 weeks, and I have nothing to offer. I am working to rebuild my life, not complicate it with romantic entanglements." Sarah's expression softened. "Sometimes the best things in life come when we are not looking for them. Ethan is a good man, Zelda. One of the best I have ever known. And you deserve happiness after everything you have been through." Before Zelda could respond, the kitchen door flew open, and Marcus burst in with an expression of concern. "Sarah, we have got a problem. One of the north pasture fences came down in last night's storm, and about 50 head of cattle are scattered. Ethan and I are riding out with Walt and Jim to round them up, but this storm is supposed to get worse. We might not make it back tonight." Sarah immediately shifted into crisis mode. "I will pack food and extra supplies. Take the emergency gear from the barn. Be careful, all of you." The men left within the hour, loaded with supplies and grim determination. Zelda helped Sarah prepare for the possibility of them being gone overnight, making sure there was plenty of firewood brought in and meals planned that could be kept warm indefinitely. The storm did indeed worsen as the day progressed. By evening, snow fell so thickly that visibility dropped to nearly nothing. The wind howled around the house, finding every tiny crack and gap to whistle through. Zelda and Sarah kept the fires burning and tried not to worry, though both women found themselves staring out windows into the white darkness, hoping to see signs of the men's return. By the next morning, the storm had blown itself out, leaving the world buried under several feet of fresh snow. The men returned around midday, cold and exhausted but successful in recovering the cattle. Ethan's face was wind-burned and tired, but he sought out Zelda immediately upon entering the house. "I am glad to see you safe," she said, the relief in her voice more obvious than she intended. "It would take more than a little snow to keep me from getting back here," he replied, his green eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Sarah, watching this exchange with satisfaction, cleared her throat. "Both of you are standing there letting all the warm air out. Ethan, go change into dry clothes. Zelda, help me get food ready for these half-frozen men." February arrived with a brief warming trend that made the snow begin to melt and turn the roads to thick mud. On one of these marginally warmer days, Ethan asked Zelda if she would like to accompany him into town for supplies. Sarah readily agreed that Zelda should go, giving her a knowing smile that suggested multiple motivations for the trip. The ride into Twin Falls took longer than usual due to the muddy conditions, but Zelda found she did not mind. She and Ethan talked easily, their conversation flowing as naturally as it did during their evening talks. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the early days of the ranch, painting vivid pictures with his words. In town, they completed their errands efficiently. Ethan introduced Zelda to various merchants and townspeople, and she noticed he never failed to mention that she worked for his family, making her position clear to avoid any potential gossip. His consideration for her reputation warmed her heart. As they prepared to leave town, Ethan steered the wagon toward a small shop Zelda had not noticed before. "I need to pick up something I ordered," he explained, setting the brake and hopping down. He emerged a few minutes later carrying a carefully wrapped package, which he placed in the back of the wagon without explanation. Zelda was curious but did not pry. They were about a mile out of town when Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop in a spot that overlooked the Snake River Canyon. "I want to show you something," he said, retrieving the package and helping her down from the wagon. They walked a short distance to a flat rock that provided a clear view of the canyon, with the river visible far below, glinting in the weak winter sunlight. Ethan handed her the package. "This is for you." Zelda stared at him in surprise. "For me? But why?" "Because I wanted to, and because you deserve something nice. Open it." With trembling fingers, Zelda unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful shawl in deep blue wool with delicate embroidered flowers along the edges. It was the most lovely thing anyone had given her in years, and tears sprang to her eyes. "Ethan, this is too much. I cannot accept this." "Yes, you can," he said gently. "Zelda, I know we have not known each other long, but these past 2 months have been the best I can remember in a long time. You have brought something special to the ranch, to all of us, but especially to me. I find myself looking for you whenever I come in from working. I think about you when I am out riding the fence lines. I look forward to our talks in the evening more than anything else in my day." Her heart pounded as he stepped closer, his expression earnest and open. "I am not a man of fancy words or grand gestures," he continued. "But I am honest and I work hard and I know my own heart. I am falling in love with you, Zelda Brennan." have been since the day I saw you shivering on that train platform. I am not asking for an answer right now. I know you have been through a lot and need time to settle and figure out your life. But I wanted you to know how I feel, and I wanted you to have something beautiful because you deserve beautiful things." Zelda felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy mixed with relief and wonder. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been fighting it because I thought I should not, because I thought it was too soon or too complicated. But the truth is, you make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I have never experienced before. When you are near, the world feels right." Ethan reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "Then we are in agreement. We will take this slow, let it develop naturally, but we are honest with each other about what we are feeling." "Yes," she agreed, her voice stronger now. "That sounds perfect." He wrapped the new shawl around her shoulders and then, with gentle deliberation, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft and sweet, a promise rather than a demand, and Zelda felt it all the way to her toes. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The ride back to the ranch had a different quality, a sense of joyful anticipation replacing the careful friendship that had characterized their earlier interactions. They held hands on the wagon bench when the road was smooth enough not to require both of Ethan's hands on the reins. They talked about the future now, not in vague hypotheticals, but in terms that included both of them. Sarah took one look at their faces when they arrived home and broke into a wide smile. "Well, it is about time," she declared. "I was beginning to think I would need to lock you two in a room together to get you to admit your feelings." Marcus laughed at his wife's pronouncement. "Sarah has been matchmaking since the day you arrived, Miss Brennan. I hope you know what you are getting into with this family." "I believe I do," Zelda replied, her eyes finding Ethan's, "and I could not be happier about it." The next few months brought a deepening of their relationship alongside the changing of the seasons. As winter gave way to spring, the ranch burst into activity. Calves were born and needed tending. The garden was planted. Fences required mending and buildings needed repairs after the harsh winter. Everyone worked from dawn until dusk, but there were moments of beauty and joy woven throughout the labor. Ethan courted Zelda properly, with long walks in the evening after chores were done and Sunday afternoon picnics when the weather permitted. They talked about everything, learning each other's minds and hearts. He shared his dreams of expanding the ranch and maybe one day starting a horse breeding program. She confessed her secret love of poetry and her wish that she had been able to attend school longer. One Sunday in May, Ethan took her to a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, a riot of purple lupine and yellow balsam root. They sat together on a blanket, and he produced a book of poetry from his saddlebag, a collection by Longfellow. He had ridden all the way to Boise to find it, spending precious money on something he knew would make her happy. "Read to me," he requested. "I want to hear these words in your voice." So she did, reading poems about love and nature and the passage of time. Her voice gave life to the verses, and when she glanced up, she found Ethan watching her with such love in his eyes that her voice faltered. "What is it?" she asked. "I am just thinking about how lucky I am," he said, "that I decided to go to the depot that day. That I saw you shivering on that platform. That I had the chance to wrap you in my coat and, eventually, in my life. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Zelda." She set the book aside and moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "You saved my life that day, you know. I do not just mean from freezing. I mean from despair, from believing that I had no value and no future. You gave me hope and purpose and love. You showed me what it means to be truly cherished." "Marry me," Ethan said suddenly, the words emerging as if they could not be contained a moment longer. I know it has only been 6 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Zelda Brennan. I want to build a life with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. Marry me and make me the happiest man in Idaho." Zelda lifted her head to look into his eyes, her own shining with tears and joy. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Ethan Keller, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and commitment into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and laughing with pure happiness. They lay back on the blanket, hand in hand, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky and planning their future together. They were married in July, in a simple ceremony in the Twin Falls Church with the entire community in attendance. Zelda wore a cream-colored dress that Sarah had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Ethan wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his eyes shining as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the emotion behind them was anything but ordinary. When Ethan promised to love and cherish Zelda, his voice cracked with feeling. When Zelda promised to honor and support Ethan, tears streamed freely down her face. There was not a dry eye in the church as they sealed their promises with a kiss. The reception at the ranch was a joyous affair with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. The community had embraced Zelda as one of their own, and they celebrated the union with genuine happiness. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Ethan pulled Zelda into his arms for a dance. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Keller?" he murmured in her ear. "Like coming home," she replied softly. "Like finding the place I was always meant to be." They spent their wedding night in the main house, as Marcus and Sarah had tactfully announced they would be staying in town for a few days. Alone together for the first time, Ethan and Zelda discovered the physical expression of the love they had been building for months. He was gentle and patient, making sure her first time was filled with tenderness rather than pain. They learned each other's bodies with the same care and attention they had given to learning each other's hearts. The next morning, wrapped in each other's arms as golden sunlight streamed through the window, Zelda reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. Less than a year ago, she had stood on a train platform, alone and terrified, with nothing but desperation and dying hope. Now she lay beside her husband, secure in his love and in her place in this family and community. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how much can change in less than a year," she replied. "About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones." "If you had not come to Twin Falls, if your aunt had been here to meet you, we might never have met," he mused. "I do not want to be grateful for your hardship, but I cannot help being grateful for the result." "I understand what you mean," Zelda said. "Every hard thing I went through, every loss and disappointment, they all led me to you. I would not change any of it because changing it would mean losing this." They spent the next few days in their own private world, taking long rides across the ranch property, cooking meals together, and talking for hours about their plans and dreams. Ethan showed Zelda his favorite spots on the ranch, the places he went when he needed to think or when he wanted to feel close to something greater than himself. She shared these special places with him now, adding her own presence to his private sanctuaries. When Marcus and Sarah returned, the four of them settled into a new rhythm. Ethan and Zelda took over the small foreman's cabin that stood about 100 yards from the main house, giving them privacy while keeping them close to family. Zelda continued to help Sarah with the household and the boarders, but now she also managed her own home, creating a cozy sanctuary for herself and her husband. The summer passed in a blur of work and happiness. The ranch prospered under the brothers' careful management, and the small boarding house business grew as more settlers arrived in the area. Zelda discovered she had a talent for making people feel welcome, and word spread that the Keller Ranch was the best place to stay when passing through Twin Falls. In late August, Zelda began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Ethan, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. When she finally confirmed her suspicions with Sarah, who had some midwife training, she planned a special evening to share the news. She prepared Ethan's favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables and fresh bread, and set the table in their cabin with wildflowers and candles. When he came in from working, dusty and tired, he stopped in surprise at the scene. "What is all this?" he asked, a smile spreading across his face. "Sit down," Zelda said, her own smile threatening to break free. "I have something to tell you." Ethan sat, his eyes never leaving her face. She took his hands in hers, savoring the moment before everything changed again. "We are going to have a baby," she said simply. "Next spring, probably March or April." For a moment, Ethan sat frozen as if his mind needed time to process the information. Then joy exploded across his face and he leaped up, pulling Zelda into his arms and spinning her around before carefully setting her down as if she had suddenly become made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "We are having a baby. Zelda, this is incredible. Are you feeling all right? Do you need anything? Should you be standing?" She laughed at his sudden protectiveness. "I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not fragile. You are precious," he corrected, pulling her close again. "You are carrying our child, and that makes you the most important person in the world. I am going to take such good care of you, I promise." And he did. As the pregnancy progressed and autumn gave way to winter, Ethan was attentive to the point of being comically overprotective. He insisted she rest more, refused to let her lift anything heavy, and worried constantly about her health and comfort. Zelda bore his fussing with good humor, touched by the depth of his care even when it bordered on excessive. The community rallied around them, as was the way in small western towns where neighbors looked after each other. The women brought baby clothes they had made and shared advice about childbirth and infant care. The men built a beautiful cradle that they presented to Ethan and Zelda at a gathering in November. Christmas that year was especially magical. The cabin was decorated with pine boughs and holly, and Ethan surprised Zelda with a rocking chair he had ordered from a catalog, perfect for nursing and soothing a baby. She gave him a new leather-bound journal for recording ranch business, with his name embossed on the cover, and tucked inside a tiny pair of knitted booties she had made for their coming child. "I love you more than words can express," Ethan said that night as they sat together before the fire, Zelda in her new rocking chair with his hand resting on her rounded belly. "You have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A true partner, a real home, and now a family of our own." "You are my miracle," Zelda replied, threading her fingers through his. "When I stepped off that train, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. You saw me when I was at my lowest, and instead of looking away, you wrapped me in your coat and your life. You gave me everything." Winter deepened, and Zelda grew larger with the baby. She remained healthy and strong, though the final weeks of pregnancy brought the expected discomforts. Sarah stayed close, ready to help when the time came, and the local doctor was alerted that he might need to make the trip to the ranch. In early March, on a day when spring seemed to be flirting with the idea of arriving early, Zelda went into labor. Sarah immediately took charge, sending Marcus to fetch the doctor and setting Ethan to boiling water and gathering supplies. The labor lasted through the night and into the next day, and Ethan paced outside the cabin like a caged mountain lion, desperate to help but barred from entering by the convention that childbirth was women's business. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith on that clear March day, the sound of a baby's cry split the air. Moments later, Sarah emerged from the cabin with tears streaming down her face and a huge smile. "You have a son," she told Ethan. "A healthy, perfect son, and Zelda did beautifully. She is tired but fine." Ethan did not wait for further permission. He rushed into the cabin to find his wife propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and Zelda pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Meet your son," she said softly. "I thought we could name him Samuel after your father." Ethan reached out with one finger to stroke the baby's impossibly soft cheek, overwhelmed by the surge of love and protectiveness that flooded through him. "Samuel Keller," he said, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. How did I get so lucky?" "We are both lucky," Zelda corrected, watching as Ethan carefully took his son into his arms for the first time. The sight of her strong, capable husband cradling their tiny baby with such tender care brought fresh tears to her eyes. The next weeks brought the joys and challenges of new parenthood. Samuel proved to be a healthy baby with strong lungs and a healthy appetite. Ethan threw himself into fatherhood with the same wholehearted commitment he brought to everything else, changing diapers, walking the floor with the baby at night, and gazing at his son with such wonder that it made Zelda's heart ache with love. Spring arrived in full force, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle calved, the garden was planted, and Samuel grew steadily, developing a personality that seemed to be a perfect blend of his parents. He had Zelda's dark hair and Ethan's green eyes, and as the months passed, he showed signs of having inherited his father's easy temperament and his mother's sharp intelligence. That summer, as they celebrated both Samuel's growth and the second anniversary of Zelda's arrival in Twin Falls, they hosted a gathering at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came to eat, dance, and share in the joy of community. As the evening wore on and Samuel slept peacefully in his cradle on the porch, Ethan pulled Zelda away from the crowd for a private moment. They walked to the spot overlooking the canyon where he had first told her he loved her. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, and below them, the Snake River carved its eternal path through ancient stone. "2 years ago today, I went to the depot not knowing my life was about to change forever," Ethan said, pulling Zelda close against his side. "I saw you standing there, shivering and alone, and something inside me just knew you were important. I could not have told you why then, but I knew. And I was so scared," Zelda remembered. "I thought I had reached the end of everything. I had no money, no prospects, no family who wanted me. I felt completely lost." "But you were not lost," Ethan said. "You were exactly where you needed to be at exactly the right time. You were waiting for me to find you, and I was ready to be found too. We saved each other that day, Zelda." She turned in his arms to face him fully. "We did. We absolutely did. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. You gave me love beyond anything I imagined possible, and I hope I have given you something valuable in return." "You have given me everything," he assured her, cupping her face in his hands. "A wife who is my partner in every sense of the word. A son who makes every day brighter. A future that looks more beautiful than anything I dreamed of when I was just a young man trying to prove I could make something of myself. You are my great adventure, Zelda Keller." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting from a moment of compassion on a cold train platform. Behind them, the sounds of celebration drifted on the evening breeze. Ahead lay a future full of possibility and promise. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges, as life always does. The ranch continued to prosper through good management and hard work. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic child who loved the ranch and everything about it. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, sitting in front of his father on the saddle and squealing with delight. When Samuel was 3 years old, Zelda became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, who had her mother's quick intelligence and her father's easy charm. The cabin that had once seemed spacious grew more crowded, and the family began making plans to build a larger house on a beautiful piece of property near the creek that ran through the eastern section of the ranch. The new house took 2 years to complete, built with care and attention to detail. It had 4 bedrooms upstairs, a large kitchen with the latest cast iron stove, a formal dining room for special occasions, and a wide front porch perfect for watching sunsets. When they finally moved in, Zelda stood in the center of the empty front room and marveled at how far she had come. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about the girl who stepped off the train with nothing but a carpet bag and broken dreams," she said. "She could never have imagined all this. A beautiful home, healthy children, a husband who loves her beyond measure. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it is real." "It is real," Ethan murmured against her hair. "And it is only going to get better. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us, Zelda. Decades to watch our children grow, to build this ranch into something we can pass down to them, to love each other through all the seasons of life." Samuel and Rose grew up strong and healthy, absorbing the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion that their parents modeled daily. Samuel showed an early aptitude for working with animals, particularly horses, and by the time he was 12, he was helping break and train the young horses the ranch now bred in addition to running cattle. Rose had a gift for numbers and organization, and she began helping her mother with the household accounts and the boarding house records while still quite young. Marcus and Sarah remained close, their families intertwined in the way of people who shared not just blood but daily life and common purpose. Marcus and Sarah eventually had 3 children of their own, and the cousins grew up more like siblings, creating a tight-knit clan bound by love and loyalty. The Twin Falls community grew as well, transforming from a rough frontier town into a proper settlement with schools, churches, and civic organizations. Ethan and Zelda became respected members of the community, known for their generosity and integrity. They helped newcomers get established, just as Ethan had helped Zelda that long ago December day. They donated to the church building fund and supported the establishment of a proper school where their children could receive the education neither parent had been able to complete. As the children entered their teenage years, Zelda sometimes looked back on that frightened girl on the train platform and marveled at the transformation. She had arrived with nothing, but through a combination of hard work, good fortune, and the love of a good man, she had built a life beyond anything she had imagined possible. She had become a respected rancher's wife, a mother, a pillar of the community. But more than any of those roles, she had become herself strong, confident, and content. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together, Samuel approached with a shy smile and an announcement. He had been courting Mary Sullivan, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and he wanted to ask her to marry him. "You are only 19, Ethan said, though his eyes twinkled with suppressed amusement. That seems awfully young. You were not much older when you married Ma, Samuel pointed out. And you knew right away she was the one. That is how I feel about Mary. Zelda reached over and squeezed her son's hand. If you are certain she is the right woman for you, then you have our blessing. But make sure you are ready for the responsibility of marriage. It is not always easy, though it is always worth it when you marry the right person. Mary is the right person, Samuel said with absolute certainty. I am as sure of that as I am of anything. The wedding took place the following summer, a joyous occasion that brought the entire community together. Watching her son pledge his life to the woman he loved, Zelda felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. She had been given a chance at love and family when she thought all hope was lost. And now her son was embarking on his own journey of building a life with his chosen partner. As the years continued to pass, the ranch evolved with the times. New techniques in cattle breeding and ranch management were incorporated. The horse breeding program that Ethan had dreamed about in the early days became a profitable reality, with Keller horses gaining a reputation throughout the territory for soundness and temperament. Samuel took on more responsibilities, eventually managing much of the day-to-day operations while Ethan focused on the broader business aspects. Rose, meanwhile, developed an unexpected passion for teaching. She attended normal school in Boise and returned to Twin Falls to teach at the growing local school. She married at 24 to a young lawyer who had recently opened a practice in town, and they built a house in Twin Falls itself while remaining closely connected to the ranch family. The birth of grandchildren brought new joy to Ethan and Zelda's lives. Samuel and Mary had 4 children in fairly rapid succession, 2 boys and 2 girls who inherited the family love of ranching. Rose and her husband had 3 children who grew up with the benefit of education and opportunity their grandmother had lacked at their age. Through it all, through the births and deaths, the successes and setbacks that mark any long life, Ethan and Zelda's love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. They still took walks in the evening when the weather permitted, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who recognized the gift they had been given. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration at the ranch. The house and yard were filled with people, with food and music and laughter. Toward the end of the evening, Ethan pulled Zelda away for a private moment. They walked to the cabin where they had spent the first years of their marriage, which was now used as a guest house. "You remember our first night here?" Ethan asked, his arm around Zelda's waist. "I remember everything," she replied. "I remember how gentle you were, how patient. I remember lying beside you as the sun came up and thinking I had never been so happy in my entire life. I remember thinking I could not possibly love you more than I did that day," Ethan said. "But I was wrong. I love you more now than I did then, and I will love you even more tomorrow than I do today. You are the gift that keeps giving, Zelda Keller." She turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. They were older now, marked by years of hard work and exposure to the elements. Ethan's hair had gone mostly gray, and lines creased his face. Zelda's dark hair held silver threads, and her hands bore the marks of decades of labor. But when they looked at each other, they saw past the physical changes to the essential truth beneath. They were still the 2 people who had found each other on a cold train platform, still bound by a love that had proven stronger than any challenge life could throw at them. "I love you," she said simply. "I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left. You are my home, Ethan Keller, not this ranch or this land, but you. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They kissed as the stars came out overhead, the sounds of celebration drifting from the house. Their family was gathered there, the children and grandchildren who represented their legacy. But in this moment, they were just Ethan and Zelda, two people whose lives had intersected at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. The years continued their steady march forward. Idaho achieved statehood in 1890, bringing new opportunities and changes to the territory. The railroad expanded, bringing more settlers and more commerce. Twin Falls grew from a rough frontier town into a proper city, with paved streets and electric lights and all the modern conveniences. Through it all, the Keller Ranch remained a constant, an anchor in a rapidly changing world. It weathered economic downturns and harsh winters, adapted to new technologies and changing markets. It remained in family hands, passed from generation to generation, each adding their own mark while respecting the foundation laid by those who came before. Ethan and Zelda grew old together gracefully, maintaining their health and vigor well into their later years. They became the beloved patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, sought out for advice and wisdom, revered for their enduring love and the life they had built together. On a clear spring morning in 1910, as new grass greened the pastures and the first flowers bloomed in Zelda's carefully tended garden, they sat together on their porch in the rocking chairs that had become their customary spots. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but still sharp of mind and warm of heart. "Do you ever think about that day?" Zelda asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "The day we met." "I think about it all the time," Ethan admitted. "I think about what might have happened if I had not gone to town that day, or if I had arrived 5 minutes later, or if I had not noticed you standing there. So many things had to line up exactly right for us to find each other." "I prefer to think it was meant to be," Zelda said. "That somehow, someway, we were always going to find each other. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it, and I do not want to imagine a universe where we never met." "That universe would have been a much poorer place," Ethan agreed. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You know what I am most grateful for? That I did not hesitate. I saw you needed help, and I offered it without overthinking or worrying about propriety or consequences. I just acted on the impulse to help, and it gave me everything I hold most dear." "Your kindness changed my life," Zelda said softly. "Your simple act of wrapping a stranger in your coat set everything else in motion. You taught me that there is still goodness in the world, still people who help without expecting anything in return. You restored my faith in humanity and in myself." They sat in peaceful silence, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, listening to the sounds of the ranch cattle lowing, horses whinnying, the distant bark of dogs. This was their legacy, built not just on land and livestock, but on love and commitment and the simple decision to offer compassion to a stranger in need. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the day warmed, their daughter Rose came out onto the porch with glasses of cool water. "You two need anything else?" she asked, her voice warm with affection. "We have everything we need," Ethan assured her, smiling at his daughter. "We have family, we have this beautiful place, and we have each other. What more could anyone want?" Rose kissed them both on the cheek and went back inside, leaving them to their companionable silence. A light breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers, the distinctive smell of Idaho in spring. "Thank you," Zelda said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan turned to look at her. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for helping me when you had no reason to, for loving me when I had forgotten I was worthy of love, for giving me a life beyond anything I could have dreamed." for being exactly who you are, which is the best man I have ever known." "Oh, my love," Ethan said, his own voice catching. "You are thanking me for receiving the greatest blessing of my life. You are thanking me for being given the privilege of loving you. If anyone should be grateful, it is me. You took a rough cowboy with big dreams and not much else and built a life with him. You gave me children and grandchildren and decades of happiness. You are my great adventure, Zelda, and I would live every day exactly the same if it meant ending up here, with you, surrounded by the family we created together." They sat holding hands as the morning stretched toward noon. Two people who had built a life from a moment of compassion, who had transformed a chance encounter into a love story that spanned decades. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and activity, a testament to what could be built when hard work met opportunity and when love provided the foundation. As afternoon, sun warmed the porch and cast long shadows across the yard, their grandchildren approached, seeking stories as they often did. The youngest, a girl of 7, climbed into Zelda's lap while the others settled on the porch steps. "Tell us how you and Grandpa met," the girl requested, as she had requested countless times before. Zelda looked at Ethan and he smiled encouragingly. It was a story they never tired of telling, a story that had become part of family legend. "Well," Zelda began, her voice taking on the cadence of a practiced storyteller. "It was a very cold December day in 1884, and I stepped off a train in Twin Falls with nothing but a carpetbag and a heart full of hope. I stood on that platform shivering, waiting for someone who never came, thinking my life had reached its end. But really, it was just beginning because your grandfather was there and he saw me, and he did something very simple that changed everything. He gave you his coat," the children chorused together, knowing the story by heart but loving to hear it again. "He gave me his coat," Zelda confirmed, "but he gave me so much more than that. He gave me warmth when I was cold, hope when I was despairing, and love when I thought I would never be loved again. He wrapped me in his coat and in his life, and I have been grateful every single day since." Ethan picked up the story. "And when I saw your grandmother standing there, something inside me recognized her. I did not know then that she would become my wife and the mother of my children and the great love of my life. But some part of me knew she was important, that helping her was the most significant thing I would do that day. And I was right. Taking her to the ranch, introducing her to the family, that set in motion everything good that came after." The children listened raptly, even though they knew every word. This was their origin story too, the moment when their family truly began. Their very existence depended on a cowboy noticing a shivering woman on a train platform and deciding to help. "The moral of the story," Zelda concluded, "is that kindness matters. Small acts of compassion can change lives in ways you never imagine. If your grandfather had walked past me that day, if he had decided I was not his problem, your grandfather and I would never have fallen in love. Your parents would never have been born and you would not exist. One small choice, one moment of caring about a stranger, created all of this." She gestured to encompass the ranch, the family, everything they had built together. The children nodded solemnly, understanding on some level that they were being given more than just a story. They were being given a lesson about how to move through the world, about the importance of noticing people in need and offering help without expectation of reward. As evening approached and the children were called inside for supper, Ethan and Zelda remained on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air cooled as darkness approached, and Ethan retrieved a blanket to drape over their laps, a gentle echo of that long-ago coat offered on a cold platform. "I meant what I said to the children," Zelda said. "About kindness mattering. You taught me that, Ethan. Before I met you, I had begun to believe the world was a harsh place where people only looked out for themselves. You proved me wrong, and in doing so, you gave me faith in human goodness again." "And you taught me that love is worth the risk," Ethan replied. I had watched other men get married and seen how it could go wrong. I had convinced myself I was fine alone, that I did not need that kind of connection. Then you came into my life, and suddenly I understood what I had been missing. You taught me that opening your heart is scary but necessary, and that the reward for that vulnerability is a richness of life I never knew existed. They sat together as stars appeared overhead, one by one, filling the vast Idaho sky with pinpoints of light. Inside the house, the sounds of family life continued, voices raised in conversation, the clatter of dishes, a burst of laughter. Outside, the ranch settled into its evening rhythms, animals finding their rest, the day's work complete. "I am tired," Zelda admitted, though her tone was peaceful rather than troubled. "Tired in the way of someone who has lived a full life and is content with how it turned out." "I know what you mean," Ethan agreed. "Sometimes I feel every one of my 73 years. But I also feel grateful for every single one of them, especially every year I have spent with you." "Do you have any regrets?" she asked, a question she had never posed before. Ethan was quiet for a moment, truly considering. "No," he said finally. "Not a single one." "Oh, I made mistakes along the way, certainly. I could have managed money better in the early years, or made different decisions about which cattle to buy or how to expand the ranch. But nothing I would truly call a regret, nothing I would change if I could go back. Every decision, good or bad, led to this moment, and this moment is exactly where I want to be." "I feel the same," Zelda said. "Even the hard things, even the losses and the struggles, they all had purpose. They all brought us to here, to this beautiful life we have made together." The years that followed continued in much the same vein, marked by the normal progression of aging and the joys of watching subsequent generations grow and thrive. Samuel took over complete management of the ranch, running it with the same integrity and vision his father had shown. Rose's children went on to college, becoming teachers and lawyers and doctors, contributing to their community in new ways. Ethan's health began to fail when he was 78 years old. It happened gradually, a slow decline rather than a sudden crisis, and he faced it with the same courage and grace he had brought to every other challenge in his life. Zelda cared for him with tireless devotion, just as he had cared for her through illnesses and difficulties over the decades. On a spring morning much like the one on which they had first told their grandchildren the story of how they met, Ethan woke in their bed with Zelda beside him and knew his time was coming to an end. He felt no fear, only a sense of completion and profound gratitude. "Zelda," he said softly, and she woke immediately, always attuned to his needs. "I am here," she said, taking his hand. "I want you to know," he began, his voice weak but clear, "that you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment has been precious. I am not afraid to go because I know I lived well. I loved deeply and I was loved in return. That is all anyone can ask for." Tears streamed down Zelda's face, but she managed to smile. "You are not going anywhere yet. You are strong. You can fight this." "I do not want to fight anymore," he said gently. "I am tired, my love, and I am ready, but I need you to promise me something." "Anything," she whispered. "Promise me you will keep living. Really living, not just existing. Promise me you will find joy in the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. Promise me you will tell our story so they never forget that love is worth everything, that kindness matters, that small moments can change the world." "I promise," she managed through her tears. "But I do not know how to be in this world without you." "You do," he assured her. "You did it before you met me, and you are stronger now than you were then. You have family around you, people who love you. You will be all right, and I will be waiting for you when your time comes. This is not goodbye forever, just goodbye for now." He died peacefully 2 days later, surrounded by his family, with Zelda holding his hand as she had held it countless times over 46 years of marriage. The entire community turned out for his funeral, a testament to the life he had lived and the respect he had earned. Zelda mourned deeply, feeling the loss like a physical wound. For weeks, she struggled to find purpose in a world without Ethan. But she had made him a promise, and Zelda Brennan Keller was a woman who kept her promises. Gradually, she found her way back to living rather than just existing. She threw herself into being a grandmother and great-grandmother, becoming the family matriarch in truth as well as title. She wrote down the story of her life and her great love, wanting future generations to understand where they came from and the values upon which their family was built. She volunteered at the church and the school, giving back to the community that had welcomed her so many years before. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch of the house she and Ethan had built together and remember. She remembered the cold, the fear, the shivering desperation of that day on the platform. She remembered the warmth of his coat and the kindness in his eyes. She remembered their first kiss, their wedding day, the birth of their children, and countless ordinary moments that had become extraordinary through the simple act of sharing them with the person she loved most. Zelda lived another 12 years after Ethan's death, years filled with purpose and love even in the midst of grief. She saw grandchildren married and great-grandchildren born. She watched the ranch continue to prosper under Samuel's management. She witnessed the world change in remarkable ways, from the advent of automobiles to the horror of the Great War, to the transformation of the American West from frontier to settled land. When she died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91, she was surrounded by 4 generations of family, all of whom existed because a cowboy had noticed a shivering woman on a train platform and decided to help. Her funeral was as well attended as Ethan's had been, a celebration of a life well lived and a love story that had become legend. They buried her beside Ethan on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Idaho sky they had both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line that captured the essence of their story. She was shivering on the train platform. He wrapped her in his coat and his life. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each adding their own chapter to the ongoing story. But always, the tale of Ethan and Zelda remained the foundation, the reminder of where it all began. Their great-grandchildren told the story to their children, who told it to theirs, ensuring that the lessons of kindness, compassion, and enduring love were never forgotten. In the end, their story was both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary in that it was simply 2 people who met, fell in love, and built a life together. Extraordinary in the circumstances of their meeting and the depth of devotion they maintained through decades of partnership. They proved that the smallest acts of kindness can have the most profound consequences, that love is worth every risk, and that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives are simply doorways to the brightest chapters yet to come. Years later, when historians documented the early settlement of Twin Falls and the surrounding area, the Keller family featured prominently. The ranch was noted as one of the longest continuously operated family ranches in the region. The various businesses and civic contributions of the Keller descendants were cataloged and celebrated. But the story that captured imaginations, that appeared in local histories and newspaper retrospectives was always the tale of how it all began. A young woman, alone and desperate on a cold December platform. A cowboy who noticed her need and responded with simple, uncomplicated kindness. A coat offered freely, warmth shared without expectation. And from that small moment, a love that spanned lifetimes, a family that flourished for generations, and a legacy that demonstrated the transformative power of human compassion. In the great sweep of history, Ethan and Zelda Keller might have been just two more settlers who helped tame the American West. But to those who knew their story, to the family who carried their blood and their values forward into an uncertain future, they were so much more. They were proof that love conquers all, that kindness matters, that the choices we make in small moments can echo through eternity. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this mortal realm, two souls who found each other against all odds continue their eternal dance, wrapped forever in the warmth of a love that began with a coat offered freely on a cold platform, and that would never, ever end.